Alright. Looks like stuff is working. Cool. So there's this recent news story out that a lot of people are talking about. It's called Meta. Facebook has renamed their company. I think there's a more complex corporate thing that's going on. But the main point is that we have a very large company that has decided to officially announce that it's going in a new direction. And that new direction is that they are explicitly saying that their company is now about the metaverse, whatever that means. So today in this stream, I'm going to go over how this idea of the metaverse or meta, whatever you want to call it, goes back quite far. The specific angle I'm going to be looking at that maybe other people haven't talked so much about is how these ideas have long been seeded in the consciousness of millennial generation Asians. So for me, I'm Chinese American, born in the West. So specifically, that's kind of what I know about from personal experience. But having talked to friends from Asia and a lot of different people, the things that I'm going to be talking about today, I think they're quite familiar to a lot of people all around the world, but particularly among Asian American people living in the West. And okay, so beyond that, then there's two sort of sources we could say that go into a lot of this Asian American culture stuff coming from the East and the West. The first side is the deeper connections that come from Western literature, Western media itself. So this will be a lot of your famous mainstream science fiction type stuff. A lot of American authors, maybe British authors. I know of a lot of this stuff. I haven't written about, or not written, haven't read a whole lot of it firsthand, though I have read some. For example, I think everyone here is probably familiar with the titles like Brave New World, 1984, this sort of thing. You could find countless headlines about, the world has turned into 1984. Yes, and astute people point out that it's quite more like Brave New World in many ways. But I digress. Let's turn back to the topic at hand. So, continuing in the vein of the stream that I outlined in the previous thing, here I'm trying to be very low budget, low prep. I don't want this sort of stuff to take up more time than it should. The goal with these streams is if we're going to be doing something anyways, for example, browsing the internet, looking at things, talking about topics, then why don't we do that in a sort of public forum whereby we could get a lot of different people from different places that might not normally see or talk to each other come together on a platform like the internet and be able to, well, basically to make the best use of the internet. The internet has the possibility to connect people in all sorts of ways. So the goal of this stream is to just make that sort of place. I haven't formalized a schedule or something, but to be semi-regular, to create a space and, thumbs up, thumbs down, become the punching bag. Like Mark Zuckerberg has been elected as the establishment punching bag. It seems it's completely politically correct to say how his metaverse is lame, how he ruins kids' mental health, and all sorts of stuff like that. So we'll be talking about these things further. I'm kind of a low-key Zuckerberg defender in the sense that, as I said, I think it's politically correct to say bad things and to hate on Facebook. But as I explored a little bit last stream, I think that a lot of the times when people just criticize what the internet has become, what it is, what it's turning into, these sorts of things, and then there's no call to action of any sort, then it's kind of a waste of your time. So if you're going to be using these services, so for example, YouTube, like obviously if you're watching this, you're on YouTube. I'm on YouTube. Um, then you might as well make the best use of the platform. So that's what I'm trying to do here today, and I hope that all the other people that join on this live stream or that view this later, they could also benefit in that way. So let's get back on topic. Okay, if you look at articles, books, stuff that talk about the metaverse, I'm not going to pull up specifics now. I don't want to deal with all those click here to accept cookies and get around the paywall. I don't want to deal with all that stuff now. But I have been looking a little bit over the past couple days at what people have been saying about this metaverse thing because of Mark Zuckerberg's big keynote address thing. And then also, especially in the past couple months, there has been a lot of stuff that has been foreshadowing this. They've been creating hype in this type of way, and so I've been following this topic. I'll just state out right here. One thing I do is I invest in stocks and cryptocurrencies, and this naturally includes technology stocks, because regardless of what you think about these technologies, I think that, well, I know that people, powerful people, governments, and so on and so forth, they put a lot of money into these vehicles. So there's things that Facebook could do that, as you could say, normal people, you and I, we are not able to do the same moves that they're able to do. Like if I sell a share of Facebook, basically it's like a drop of rainwater in the ocean. It doesn't really do anything. But then if you're one of these really big institutional investors, whether it's Vanguard or BlackRock or whatever, if you make a big move with a stock or crypto or something, then it could send ripples through the whole market. So people have special terms for all this sort of stuff. Like you might have heard of like a crypto whale, a person that owns a ton of a cryptocurrency. So their moves buying and selling stuff, it has ripples throughout the whole market. Anyways, that being said, when we think about sort of what these companies are and the projects they could sponsor, and the sort of timelines they deal with, I think one thing to recognize is that they are not people living paycheck to paycheck, worried about the next plate of food on the table. So if you're Facebook and you have a vision for something that you want to build, it doesn't matter if it's profitable today or even tomorrow or even next month or even next year. But that would be very different from, like, if you're, let's say you're working in the service industry, you're working at a restaurant, something like that. If you are suddenly very rude to customers, you do some sort of unacceptable behavior, unless you actually own the place or something, chances are you're going to get in trouble for that. You don't provide immediate service, immediate value, well, then you're going to get fired. Sort of moving up, you could say, in terms of jobs or management, then your time horizons become longer. So if you're no longer the actual server at the restaurant, but you're the manager, well, then the sort of decisions that you make might be a little bit more macro. For example, you might be in charge of recruiting or finding employees, training employees, this sort of thing. So you're no longer just saying like tomorrow will I have my job. You're looking a little bit beyond that because maybe you're not even dealing directly with the customer. Instead, you're dealing with the employees and looking at how to provide the some service, let's say over a month to month basis instead of a day to day basis. And then, of course, as you go up and up this hierarchy, um, you could see how the direction and stuff that people follow changes. Anyways, I bring up all this to say that people now, they might look and see the metaverse and say, oh yeah, what what a pipe dream. You have your lame little cartoon avatars. You don't look human to begin with, and your avatar looks even less human, so on and so forth. People have a lot of shade to throw on Mr. Zuckerberg. But I think a more important issue to look at is to say, all right now we see this thing, we think it's lame, whatever. That's like level one analysis. We move up a level, you could say, okay, he's actually announced sort of his strategy. Now, is he positioned to do it? So, I know people um, that, let's say, they used to be a Linux fanboy, something like that. They have very strong opinions about, this software, this software, that. Um, then they get hired by somebody like Microsoft or Google or something like that. And then strangely, it's like all these views that they had before, suddenly they change. Not to blame or say that these people shouldn't do that, but chances are what they did is they signed some contract. They now work for one of these big entities, and then because of that, they are not as free to talk about what they actually think of stuff. And beyond that, they kind of have a vested interest in the success of the endeavor of whatever they're working for or whatever they're doing, and you don't want to bite the hand that feeds, so to speak. So, if Google or Microsoft or whoever is giving you a nice salary, and you work hard every day, you support a family, you support, help out your friends who are in hard times, whatever it is that you do. This isn't to say that people shouldn't work for these companies or do these things. It's just to say that when people make certain decisions about who they work for and what they do, then there are strings attached. Okay, so a long-winded way of saying, with Facebook and the metaverse and stuff like this, they are able to have a big macro vision with lots of money to hire people to do things that, from just a normal business perspective, might be considered totally useless or stupid. One manifestation of this is providing people products that they didn't ask for. So one thing that a lot of innovation and technology is people will create a need in people for something that they do not need. And if this thing is able to sell at scale, then suddenly you have a vehicle by which you could make a ton of money because you've created a whole market for a new class of things. Okay, so with that as a launching point, let us get into some of these topics. Okay, so I pulled up this article called The Metaverse, What It Is, Where to Find It, Who Will Build It, and Fortnite, by this fellow, Matthew Ball. It seems that this is one of this guy's specialties. He, I think .vc is venture capitalist, probably. But you could see he's associated with Epic Games, Mark Zuckerberg, Economist, New York Times, so all these big moneyed people. Um, and then he creates this website where he writes a lot about these technology topics. One of them being the metaverse. Okay, so in this article, which you can see the title here and go read it or take a look at his site if you're interested, makes this broad point that a lot of the stuff that is being announced as a kind of new and breakthrough sort of thing today has long underpinnings and cultural currents. And I could not agree more with this observation. So, for example, here some relatively more recent examples: Ready Player One and The Matrix. Ready Player One, fairly recent film, and then The Matrix. I don't know, they're making a whole bunch of sequels, but I think most people are at least familiar with that title, at least if you're over a certain age. Anyways, a lot of this media has gone on to bring into popular consciousness a number of ideas. So here are some of those ideas that Matthew Ball lists: a virtual world, virtual space, virtual reality, digital and virtual economy, a game, virtual theme park for Disneyland, an app store, and a UCG platform. What does he mean by that? Something about content. Right, so it's like you could build a sort of brand in these places. So what I'm going to show here today is that all of these things we've been trained to be familiar with these ideas. These things are nothing new. So maybe if you said this stuff in a different decade, maybe the 60s or something, then people will think you're tripping on some drug. Don't do drugs except for coffee. Legalized stimulants. Okay. So I'll talk about a couple examples. One game a lot of people kind of like me, so I'm, as I said, millennial generation, Asian American, but lots of other people too, are familiar with this game called MapleStory. Now, when I was in grade school, I think middle school mostly, but still people probably played it in high school. This game got really popular, and the premise of the game is you make some kind of character, a little avatar of some class. So you have your swordsman, your magician, whatever you want to call it, and you're free to advance in this virtual world. So how could you advance in the world? One thing to do is you train your character. So you go around. You're using your keyboard. You're pressing buttons, and then by pressing those buttons, you could make your character do the same attack again and again and again, killing virtual monsters. And when you do that, then there's some kind of reward that you get. So it's like if you if you work an actual job, you put in work doing something. In this case, you press buttons on a keyboard to make a game designed by somebody else, then you're able to get money. Okay, and then with that in-game money, what do you do with it? Well, you have to cover the expenses of your character. So in MapleStory here, for example, we have this hit points, this red bar here. When you're fighting, the monsters will fight back. They'll do some damage to you. So people would have to buy like these healing items, so that while you're mashing your keyboard doing your attacks, you're also mashing the healing button to heal your character. So if you're really bad at the game and you're getting hit more than the money that you're picking up from the monsters, let's just say because you're trying to train on too strong of monsters, then that will not be a profitable business model, so to speak, because then you'll end up having to spend more money healing yourself than you will be bringing in. So you'll go broke, basically. And what do you do in that circumstance? Well, then the game, to win at the game, what you'll do is you'll start to train on weaker monsters until the strength of your character is built up. So a lot of this, it's a lot of work. So people, they came up with a term for this sort of thing. They call it grinding. So you will have people that play these games and they'll spend hours and hours grinding, sitting there mashing quite monotonous task, just pressing buttons, playing this game for in-game rewards. And then you could ask, all right, so then what's the point? Why would you do this as opposed to like going to get a job and getting paid for your time? So you're sitting there getting paid virtual money and spending hours and hours on this. And let me tell you, like I myself, I was not totally addicted to this game, but I did put many hours into it, and good parents would say, hey, stop wasting your time playing the video game. But as a kid, especially if you have friends and other people that are investing a lot of time and energy into this sort of thing, it might consume your life. It might be one of the main things that you think about. I remember at school, during the lunch break, recess, the small amounts of free time that we had, a lot of the nerds would talk about these games, the economy of the games, like what item costs what, new strategies to get ahead more, and so on and so forth. I think it's a very natural thing. If people are playing a game of some sort together, then people that are very invested in it, in the sense that they're putting a lot of time and work into what they're doing, they want to know how to succeed in that space. So that's to say that this game, MapleStory, is one example of I would say a kind of specific niche whereby Asian Americans specifically, but also Asians in Asia. I believe this game, I think it's from Korea originally, but it became very popular all over the world. I think one of the main places was Southeast Asia. So that would be like Singapore, Vietnam, places like this. This stuff would become popular. So a few more notes about this. Like, as you could see, the art style is kind of anime inspired. They call this sort of art chibi style. So, we'll talk in a bit. So these are some Facebook avatars. We could kind of contrast the style. So let's see, MapleStory characters. We'll just show this for a bit. Yeah, so like here's some examples of what they would look like. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff that basically people think is cool in anime and the fantasy genre was created in this game. So you might watch different, Japanese anime and you think, oh, that's so cool desu, so cool. And then you have this game where you have the opportunity to play as these characters. So there's this kind of meme saying like, oh, they made anime real. It's so cool that anime is real, because what's cool about anime for a lot of people, it's you have people with giant swords, magical powers, all these sorts of things where it's like, if I were able to do that, in real life, that would be so cool. So games like MapleStory, as an example, they offered a vehicle by which people could experience and do these things in a game in a way that was actually quite immersive. And I myself, I'll confirm that it was immersive because why, if you could go and ride your bicycle outside, why would somebody choose instead to sit at home smashing buttons on a keyboard? The game has to at least be somewhat halfway decent for anybody to choose to do that. Otherwise, like, what's the point? So, anyways, yeah, MapleStory, you can see that there's these characters that you play as. So I think the general accepted term now for these is an avatar. So you have some kind of avatar that you could control. You could think of it as a kind of digital puppet. I think that in a lot of these old games, people would not necessarily play as a representation of themselves. Like with MMORPGs, there's this funny term, GIRL, which would be, of course, that's a spelling for the word girl. But the joke is that a lot of people that are playing with a female avatar on a video game, they're actually a guy in real life, a GIRL. So, with a lot of these games, people will embrace the sort of role-playing aspects and play as a character completely different from themselves. But I think in any game like this, you'll also find a lot of people that choose and play as a character that is a representation of themselves in some way. So, for example, when I played this sort of game, what would I do? I would be quite boring and generic about it. Like, look, I'm wearing just a gray sweat jacket here, nothing fancy or interesting. In the same way, my personality would translate to these games, where it'd be like, all right, what are the different options? Okay, so here's a class, swordsman, whatever. Okay, so what is the sort of basic outfit for the swordsman? All right, I don't really care to pay more than I have to for it to look pretty. I just want something that looks standard. All right, that will do the job. And then I would just be more interested in the game and the game mechanics as opposed to stuff like that. So when I played this game, I was like, what sort of character should I pick? All right, just generic male character. All right, no blue skin or anything weird like that. Just very normal, generic, basically. So that's how I played that game, and I think my personality is kind of like that. I don't particularly care to do anything showy or flashy, or anything. I have a belief that people are unique, whether they like it or not. So you don't have to go out of your way to try to distinguish yourself, because there's distinguishing characteristics about you, whether you want that to be true or not. Anyways, I digress. So back to this game exploration stuff. So MapleStory, they brought together a lot of these aspects that are described now, talking about the metaverse. They did make a digital and virtual economy. So as I mentioned briefly in the stream, there was some mechanism by which players could earn money, which essentially came down to some kind of work. You would use your keyboard and spend your time participating in this virtual world, and then by doing so, the game world would give you some kind of currency. Then with that game currency, then people could trade and buy and sell and do stuff like that. Here's where the NFTs come in. So yes, NFTs, value, stuff like that. There needs to be some kind of scarcity in these games for stuff. Otherwise, the economy, nobody cares. So for a sort of game-like aspect, one of the things that always drove the economies of these games is there's certain items that are rare. There's certain items that are rare and valuable, that people would spend a ton of money on, and it all relates back to sort of just normal human stuff. You know, people might spend tons of time and effort to do stuff, whereas to just get by and live, you don't need that much money in a sense. But most people, you know, you don't want to live out of your car. There's certain stuff, basic necessities. All right, so then that's a certain level, and then beyond that, right? People are ambitious. They work hard, uh, because among other things, they want stuff, right? They want to live big, and the same could be said of digital spaces. So you'll always get people, when you have a game of scale, that want to succeed in these worlds. So to successfully design a game that people care about, that's like this sort of multi-massive online game, you have to create some sort of thing that people want. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So I'll just briefly digress and talk about like some other games. So like let's talk about like Dota or League of Legends, some game like that. So how do you get people to care about games like that? One way in which you get people to care about games like that is they want to be they want to win, right? A lot of people play games to win, you know, even a chess ranked tournament, right? So naturally, to succeed in that sort of game, you get good at winning at that game, and then that's exciting to people because there's something exciting about playing a game and getting better at the game. Um, these MMORPGs, they're a little bit different. They're kind of like a model of real life in this sense that I don't think most people play. Most people don't participate in real life to win and defeat other people. Some people do, a lot of people do, but not everybody. Oh, we have a comment from King Herring. He says, minimum living will be a pod in some remote area of Montana that you take a hyperloop to live for $200 a month, and your world would be entirely online. Yeah. So here we have a description of a sort of model, and we'll maybe this is a good transition to say, okay, so I've been talking a lot. Oh, it's been like an hour already about the sort of mechanics of these games and why people find them interesting. So we'll cut right to the central issue. So what these games want to do is they want to provide a viable space for people to spend their time, basically to live their lives, that are engaging enough such that people will put up with a major downgrade in what you might call quality of life from a material or wealth perspective. So King Herring here says, yeah, minimal living will be a pod in some remote area of Montana that you take a hyperloop to live in. So we have some good cultural references here. We have the live in a pod, and in some ways we're already seeing this sort of thing. So like there's this phenomenon of what they call tiny homes. Like these things are big. Well, that was funny. They're not big. They're small. They're tiny. But if we go on social media and stuff, we could see how people, people meaning marketers, sort of big cultural makers, whatever you want to call it. Like the Time magazine probably has an article about these things. there are these ideas of, well, you actually really don't need that much to live. So why don't you have the highest of high tech? For example, um, you could take the hyperloop, right? So you don't have to drive a car, you don't have to do car maintenance, which I don't like car maintenance. That's work. So what if I could just take the hyperloop um, to whatever sort of thing I do? Yeah, and here in this picture, like a lot of these tiny homes, you could see they have solar panels and stuff. So the idea of technology and also green energy is a huge part of this. So it's supposed to be sustainable in the sense that you could just live in this thing and just continue doing activities until the day you die. And because it uses green technology as sustainable, you never have to change. Okay, so that's all fine and good if somebody chooses to do that. But I think a lot of people wouldn't choose to do that. Meaning, if you just showed them two potential paths it could go on, like, okay, here's path one, a beautiful, pristine countryside. Here's a house, and let's say you actually do like traditional things, like your day-to-day activities is you maintain a garden, you do some woodwork, you build like tables and chairs, and then also you do some trading, like you trade eggs and milk, stuff like that. I think a lot of people, they would really like that type of life. In fact, uh, there's whole video games based on this idea of a sort of idyllic farm sort of thing. I'm forgetting the name of one of them off the top of my head right now, but that's to say that there's that idea. And then on the other hand, you say, or you could live in a pod, a tiny home, and take the hyperloop, and then just simulate all these things. Like, there's not even a scam or a lie here. You're overtly saying one of them is the real thing, and then the other one is a simulation. So what's the selling point of the simulation? And that's where we come back to stuff like Maple Story. So I think there's a kind of like nihilist position somebody might take up, which is to say, if in the end of the day, we all just die and I'm just brain chemicals, and I could get this simulation, which is pretty good. It tickles the right neurons in the right way. It's not perfect, but I could get this reality for putting in a lot less effort and stuff from this other reality. Then I think it's quite natural for people to choose sort of the game existence. So going to Maple Story, like, I think where I'm from, a lot of very ambitious people, a lot of Asian Americans. There's stereotypes. You say, like, you become a doctor or a lawyer. To become a doctor and a lawyer and to advance, be the top of these standardized tests, it's all very difficult. Nowadays, we'll see all these stories about stress, mental health, this sort of thing, underscoring the fact that I think the majority of people who try to climb these ladders, it could be a very, very miserable thing. And one of the reasons why I think that is because these systems are inherently a kind of winner take all system. Like, let's say you have an elite university and they only admit the top 5% of applicants. Uh, it's just like, math here. If you take the top 5% of applicants, then by definition, you exclude the bottom 95%. So that's just saying the exact same thing, but you kind of frame it in a different way. Um, you could see how you have these systems that are very winner take all types of games of advancement. So I think what happens, you could say, okay, so what do you want? You know, the pod or the house, right? A lot of people see this binary opposition, and they see that it is kind of the only option in front of them. And at a certain point, if people are born differently, they have different abilities. Let's say that you're not actually very good in school, then a lot of people will basically say, I give up on reality one, and I'm actually gonna experience and feel all the success and stuff and make friends and do everything else in the reality two. So it's like reality one, not going so hot. However, I actually don't have to succeed in reality one to have feelings of success. I could succeed in reality two. Um, there's a lot of stereotypes, about nerds. Like I'll go to the guy on the preview image of this screen. This is from this game, Sword Art Online. So there's this sort of character who, kind of skinny, not very strong looking guy. Let's go to the virtual reality. And the sort of day-to-day activity that this person is doing is they're playing this this virtual reality game. So you're lying here and you're doing stuff with your brain, and then these headsets are picking it up, and then they're translating it into how you react with the world, and that is the sort of actions that you do. So there's a physical manifestation of how this way of being shows choosing to succeed in the virtual world over choosing to succeed in the real world. You want to succeed in the real world. Here, we'll get some stream entertainment. Then you go and you pick up weights. You lift heavy objects. You run. You sweat. You do stuff like that. And in many ways, you could say it's boring or not stimulating. I mean, that's why it's work. That's why you have to work hard to succeed at something. So the video game temptation is to say, all right, here's how the world actually works. But it's really hard, and actually you probably won't get a lot of the things that are waved in front of your face. Are you going to go and participate and give your full energy in that world? Or instead, are you going to choose and settle for this less good thing that you know isn't real instead? So let me just take a look at the comments really here. So Dion says, one thing that needs to be factored into the argument about VR is that accepting VR as an adequate replacement for reality is a disavowal of the will to power. Yeah, I think that's another way to put it. So yeah, I'll just say that. So I was talking about sort of two types of people. One of the groups of people I describe, or the sort of person I was describing, is a person who is ambitious to succeed in some realm. Now, of course, there's a third way, which is to say, stuff is how it is, right? I'm not going to be part of the rat race. I don't need to succeed in a conventional sense in either of these spaces. Oh man, there's so much to talk about. I'll just share a cultural phenomenon. So, for example, in Japan, there's this cultural phenomenon called the fritter. I'll speak some Japanese here. Frita. So, what does the fritter do? Okay, fritter is a Japanese expression for people who lack full-time employment or are employed, excluding housewives and students. Okay, average age, blah, blah, blah. Fritters may be described as unemployed. These people do not start a career after high school or university, but instead earn money from low-paid jobs. Let's see, the word fritter, or frita, is thought to be a portmanteau of the English word free, or perhaps freelance, and the German word Arbeiter, or in Japanese, Arbeiter. So this sort of person, rather than trying to get ahead, right, they say, okay, I will simply exist and get by in this world, and there's other reasons that they live their life. They're not part of so-called hustle culture. We could talk more about this on other streams if people are interested in hustle culture. Another alternative. This has kind of gotten popular. Okay, another digression, but that's why we're on this stream together. Is lying flat. Popularized as a thing that's happening in China. So, yeah, this Chinese word literally, 躺平, literally means lying flat. So what it sounds like, just lying down. And it's this, they call it here a lifestyle choice and social protest movement in China by some young people who reject societal pressures on hard work or even overwork, and instead choose to lie down flat and get over the beatings. So it's a kind of, why am I running and running on the hamster wheel for just some cheap reward here? I'm actually just gonna hop off the wheel and not play that game, right? This is the equivalent of, wait, why am I getting upset like playing League of Legends? I'm actually just gonna like uninstall this game. Now, that's a whole nother topic. We could say, okay, so you uninstall the game, then what is it that you do, right? So, like myself personally, I think that hustle culture, stuff like that, it's not going to be good for you in the end. You need to work hard at something. Question is, what are you going to work hard at? What are you going to work hard for? We won't talk about that specifically, but that's just to say that, okay, you make an alternative reality like these, like the metaverse, these games, Maple Story, whatever you want to call it. In order to keep people engaged, you have to offer some kind of outlet for different sorts of people who try and have different levels of effort. So one of the ways in which these video games capture a general audience is that they have to have aspects of casual gaming, but then also have some sort of roads for some kind of advancement. So I was talking before about people who want to win or like rise to the top in these games. Okay, so there's a lot of people like that. Then there's other people, and I would say that when I played these games, eventually I kind of fell into this camp where you actually don't even care so much about the game itself, but you're just in the game and you just use the game because it meets some other needs. So you might just play the game. You don't actually care about getting all the special items and all of that. But if you get a lot of people that just occupy that world, and maybe they're always in the same place, people could talk to them, a kind of social thing. Maybe you could even say what I'm doing here with this stream. Like people decide to do that sort of thing, then also that's a win for Zuckerberg and the metaverse. Because what that means is that people are engaging and they're using the platform. And in a way, they're kind of, you could say that they are sort of settling for the platform. All right, just a couple comments we'll take a look at here. So King Herring says, I just realized it feels kind of like Westworld. So Westworld's this show where these people pay money to go to this theme park type place where I think you could do bad things to robots, like kill them and injure them and stuff. And people pay to do that because it's okay because they're robots. And of course there's all sorts of implications that come with that. So let's see. Maybe they were training in the system, and you'll get systems that are recording player behavior interactions with objects to simulate worlds. Yeah, so I think that in this comment we have a lot of stuff, and we're getting into a spiritual and ethical zone here. But yes, you could say that with these games and these systems, going back to this idea that there's the real world and there's how the real world works, and then there's like alternative metaverse digital world. So, in the difference between real world and the digital world is that with the digital world, you have game makers or whoever you're talking about that literally program the rules. So reality works in a certain way. You know, when we talk about science or something, this is the one definition for it is knowledge about how the world works. There's a Latin word, scientia, which is a more general word for knowledge. It doesn't mean something hyper specific like the scientific method. You know, people knew stuff before the 19th century or whatever, before the 1700s. So this word generally science, right? Nowadays people kind of construe it in a very specific sense. But I think a more general, broad definition of science, a lot of people would probably say is okay, is that what science is being able to understand cause and effect relationships in the world. So in modern times, oftentimes what we think of as science is like, let's say you do some experiments, so you have a physical equation that models, you know, I drop a pen. So we'll do some more some more stream action. So you drop a pen, whatever, and there's a cause relationship thing that goes on there. So with science, you could write an equation and very precisely model and make predictions. So you say, okay, I drop this pencil from this height. How long will it take to fall on the ground? So with the maths, all that stuff, what you do is you come up with an equation that could very accurately tell you what's going on. So in this sense, science is understanding cause-effect relationships. Okay, so going back to King Herring's comment here about training a system, right? So when you get people to spend a lot of times in a video game and they're obeying the rules of the game because they have to, a video game, you know, it's called cheating if you break the rules of a video game. So in these games, you're constrained by the rules just by the nature of software. And then people begin to accept that that is kind of how the world works because their experience and playing these games constantly shows them that to be the case. So, like, what are some examples of ways in which we already take a lot of stuff that games have taught us for granted? So, one example that Mark Zuckerberg talked a lot about in his Facebook keynote address was this idea of the world getting smaller because you could teleport. You could instantly go from one place to another place. And actually, this is funny. This goes right back to this hyperloop comment that King Herring brought up, which is funny. Okay, so one of the ideas of these video games is this abstraction of time and space, such that you kind of go through portals or ports, and you're transported from one place to another at very high speeds. So in a video game, this is extremely common. Like, I pulled up a screenshot here of this video game, Ragnarok Online. A lot of MMORPGs, yeah, they have this idea, like to go to a new location, you'll step through one of these portals, right? Here, two-way teleport. It's probably about how people move between these two things. Okay, so in a video game, what could happen is you train people to become very familiar with particular sorts of ideas, to have expectations about how stuff works. I just thought of this, like another way in which we see this whole idea of portals, for instance, is with aircraft, with flying, right? So you go into one airport building, you know, Maybe you pass by McDonald's, you get a French fries. Probably not healthy to eat. Don't eat too many of those soy seed oils. Not good for you. Um, you go into the airport, and then there's a certain amount of time which passes before you arrive at another airport. Um, but the journey itself is quite abstracted. It's not like walking along the road, navigating stuff out, finding out what's going. It's kind of like a teleportation with a bunch of lag, and might be, let's say, 3 hours, and you watch some movie or something to try to pass the time as you sit there and you fidget, or I don't know what, I haven't been flying in a while because of all this action of the um, global event health crisis, among other reasons. Anyways, that's to say, so the video game primes people to sort of accept this idea of transportation as going from portal to portal, uh, which is very different from like walking or riding your bike or even driving a car for that matter. When you actually go on the road between two different places, there's a lot of things that you see, that you notice, and a lot of these things are not necessarily reported. Like another term I just thought of was, with all this election political stuff, I learned of the term flyover state. There's all these states that people don't know anything about because if you're just going between Los Angeles and New York, you literally fly over all these states. So this is once again this idea of these portals that are around. All right, let's return quickly to the chat because that's one of my selling points with the stream, the viewer engagement stuff. So Dion says, regarding hard work, the question is cui bono. All right, guys, I'm going to show you some mad hacks. When somebody says some smart thing that I don't understand, of course, you could just go and you could Google it. Like, cui bono, who stands or stood out to gain from a crime. A more big-brained place to go is this site called Wiktionary. And I don't know, because cui bono is a multi-word thing. Oh, it looks like they do have an entry. But this site, Wiktionary, is super cool because a lot of the times they'll give the etymologies and stuff of a word. So you don't just say like, oh yeah, it translates to this, but you could actually read a little history about stuff from a pretty reliably informative site. All right, etymology from Cicero, Cicero, pro sexto Roscio Amerino, Latin, qui bono fuiset, to whom it would have benefited. Okay, yeah. So I think there's this question regarding hard work. The question is cui bono, right? You're going to be ambitious, ambitious in the sense of you're going to put forth a full effort. You're not just going to hang out. So who is it that you serve? I'm not positioned to speak or talk about spiritual questions, but I will just say that such questions have been posed in the Bible for as long as that has been around. So, good question and eternally relevant comment. And King Herring says BORGER, right? Which this is a kind of meme spelling for burger, like American burgers. We have a commentary about a lot of the American experience and how America has been built up. Actually, I'm curious, if I search like burger on the internet, what sort of images will I get? Yeah, so we have anime girls eating hamburgers. So in many ways, we could make this relevant. This is like a cultural expression of sort of a lot of this stuff that's going on. So you live in the pod, you take the hyperloop around, and you consume BORGER. So we could look at the consume meme as well. All right, we have King Herring says, I think Baudrillard predicts some part of this. This matrix is becoming even more real. However, I think that the evolved simulacrum will be hyper real, so metaverse will never become real. Right, and then we have some interest in the simulacrum stuff. Yeah, so I think that I'll just share my sort of personal analysis on some of these things so far. I think that the thing that will sort of bridge the metaverse and reality, so to speak, it is BORGER at the end of the day. But directly related to BORGER is money. So once you could once you could have normal people, so to speak, so not like not technical experts. Like you could say, oh yeah, already we have a lot of people that work fully remote, like computer programmers, maybe social media marketer. But still, these are not completely mainstream jobs. I mean, depending where you live. Like I live in California, so if you met somebody and they said that they did that sort of thing, that would not be rare or unusual at all, I would say. But maybe you go to like Montana or something, even like Utah, Colorado. Maybe there's more remote places there, or yeah, I mean California. So more remote places in general, you might not see these people. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, so the point I was making is how you would bridge these things. Okay, so what this remote work thing shows is you could basically live your life building the matrix, so to speak. So you're sitting there, you're coding, you're doing whatever, and you're building the digital infrastructure in the sense that you're writing the code, you're writing the interfaces, you're making the 3D models. You are actually building um, the thing. So you're getting paid to build. So like for example, my day job is like I'm a web developer. So when I make websites and I do that sort of work, um, basically I'm just arranging zeros and ones, right? I'm doing work that's like clerical, white collar, data work, and because I do something that's useful to somebody in the digital world, then people give me money, and then from that I could buy a burger. I could go buy a hamburger. So this though, like for me, I've been interested in technology and all this stuff for a long time. It's kind of a specialist topic to me, um, or not to me. I mean, it's a specialist topic in general. That's why if somebody says, "Oh, I major in computer science," most people probably know someone that majored in computer science at a university, but it's not everybody. Most people, by definition, are not computer nerds, and that's the big way in which like the smartphone was a super influential and important technology. And before the smartphone, you could say that the PC, the personal computer, kind of did this too, which is how do we bridge in the normal user to accept, the nerd matrix as something that is legitimate, right? Um, and then it's like, oh, there's an online K-pop concert. All right, there's an online K-pop concert. Then suddenly it's not like, oh, the internet isn't just for nerds. Like there's pretty girls on the internet, and then suddenly the internet becomes cool, and people will throw out the money that they spent working a normal, let's say, service retail job or something, in order to buy a digital experience. And once you've reached over that inflection point where it's not just nerds who care about programming theory and optimizing systems, but actually, K-pop stan who is willing to put money and also, take money out of the system. I'm sure there's event organizers, social media people who you would not count as a nerd by most standards. The HR department, there's a lot of people who are participating in these systems who are not like technical nerd tinkerer types, as is sort of typical with the computer enthusiast stereotype. We already see that these people have already been brought into this system. So once you have those people, and you could literally have normal people working on the internet and buying burgers, then everything blows up. So let's take a moment to just look at some comments really here. Right, so Dion makes some comment about some psychological things. He says, right, the things that came into being to interface with reality then evolving because the reward signal that drives their evolution switches to just being interesting or entertaining to humans. Right, so once again, the burger. Yes, once you're able to link the body, like anime, Ghost in the Shell. Well, what about your organic meat shell, right? You you incorporate your meat shell into the internet somehow, then whoa, that opens up everything. Right. Okay, King Herring makes a comment, money is good. It's not dirty, it's good. Yeah, I think that I think being a web programmer or something, it's a legitimate job. One way that I would describe it is you're a kind of digital tradesman. So just like there's plumbers and stuff that fix pipes and hook up that, if you're a web programmer, you're like a digital plumber. You hook up data pipes, right? And if you do like front end, then you make a nice looking sink. Like it's not much different. That was a revelation I had after working some manual labor. Very interesting. Okay, so Dion says, like the Disney castle, which would be useless if assaulted even by a medieval army without modern weapons. Let's see. Produce. That's funny. When you say produce here, Dion, I think of vegetables. But that also sounds like produce, like production. What a language English is. Yeah, okay, so yeah, also all sorts of interesting stuff coming on. So I think I'll talk briefly. We'll go through and talk a little bit about the consumer, and then bring this into corporate art and avatars, and then we'll call it a day. And we could have more streams later if people are interested in this stuff. Okay, so we opened the stream talking about like Maple Story, sort of how a lot of these ideas of the digital economy and these sorts of things were working. And then the question I raised was, how do you get people to actually care about the metaverse, right? Right now it's like Mark Zuckerberg is the punching bag. We all make fun of him, ha ha ha. He's lame, like a nerd trying to be cool. All right, that's how it is, but then Mark Zuckerberg has the funding, and your future husband or wife is working for him, and you depend on his metaverse to feed your family, something like that. Then suddenly, it's like the nerd power fantasy. What if, what if nerds ruled the world? And I think that is one of the ideas that we're seeing. So let's talk about this bridge between how do nerds come to rule the world. So before we see, oh look, here's Maple Story with some K-pop stuff, right? So how do you get normal people sort of to agree to participate in nerd pod world such that they would plug in their meat shell to the mercy of Meta Corporation? I think that the answer has to come down to BORGER a lot of the times. So you look at like these Facebook avatar things. Okay, quite distasteful in many ways. Why would you even use these things? I think that the answer to a lot of stuff, especially over the past year or two that we've seen, is that the reason that people will do stuff is because they're required by their employer to do stuff. So, for example, Zoom has been a very successful application. I myself use Zoom. I don't have any personal problem with Zoom. I think they provide a valuable service to people. But it's obvious that Zoom and a lot of these other platforms have gotten a major boost in use because you could say people were funneled or forced to use them in a way. It's just like we'll talk about like Microsoft Windows, for example. Um, One of the reasons that a lot of people use Windows is because Windows is the operating system that they were made to use at some point. So it's what they become familiar with. And because they're familiar with it and it does the job for what's required of them in their jobs, for example, just like sending emails, editing spreadsheets, and then maybe, you get home, you play some video games or something. For that reason, I think Windows is largely successful. Now, the Linux nerd would be the first person to say, oh, yeah, but Windows is inferior in such and such and such and such reason. And I mean, just from a technical and a like doing work and getting things done perspective, I would agree with that and say, yeah, in a lot of ways, you could see how Windows is worse for a lot of stuff. I'll just give one example. On Linux, it's much easier to install and use new software. So this is one thing that people in like web development and programming, a lot of people do a lot, is they'll download a whole bunch of little programs. They'll just try out stuff. Like, for example, I was walking around and I saw a QR code. And then I was thinking, if I wanted to make my own QR code, how would I make a QR code? So I look up, Node.js QR code, whatever, and then I could look at these libraries and know, like, okay, now I know how to make a QR code, and put out a QR code if I want to do it. Now, if you're kind of used to like a system like Linux, then all this stuff is very easy to sort of get started with and to do. But if you only live your whole life in your browser and the Steam store, let's say on a Windows PC, then all this stuff could be a lot of work and could be very, very daunting. All right, so let's... where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, so I was going to say that the reason a lot of people use a particular product is because they become accustomed to it because they're used to it. So going way back to the sort of stuff I opened this with, we could look at like MapleStory and things like this. The predecessors we have to the current iteration of the metaverse is showing some ideas and how these ideas could consistently get people used to some idea. So one obvious thing, like here, these people, they're in a shopping market. You can see they spam this symbol so the text rises higher. There's no syntactic meaning aside from they want if this message is blocked by someone else's, they want the message to be above it. So by adding all these characters, it raises the message. So that's to say, right, you have any sort of system, you're going to have a lot of people that will want to succeed in that system, and they'll keep on working out little hacks and techniques in order to extract value to win the game, so to speak. Right, so we have a lot of ideas that started, well, I won't say started, that were demonstrated to be successful in online video games, such as MapleStory, that we're discussing today. One of those ideas is digital transactions. So if you have like a large portion of the population, and their idea of money is like literally dollar bills exchanging hands, let's put on like our metaverse engineer architect hats, right? Then you think to yourself, okay, how do I get these people to sort of accept the idea that you could transact money? So we all agree online shopping has become extremely widespread for all sorts of normal people, not just technical people. How is it that e-commerce, online shopping, whatever you want to call it, has taken off so much. I think one way to explain this, which I think is pretty hard to argue against, is systems have been developed that made it extremely easy. So you just show somebody, like, yeah, you pull out this app, you scan it here, your account balance was $300, now it's $290, and here's your burrito bowl. This is a project that, like, Chipotle or whoever you have, they've succeeded at, but they've only been able to do it because billions of dollars of venture capital and all of that has gone into creating stuff like the credit card system, which came before my time. Like, my parents always had credit cards. Credit cards was not a new thing to me growing up. Like, even before I was 18, I think I had a debit card. So even I was used to going to the ATM to get money, that sort of thing. So that was like a sort of intermediate step. Now you go beyond that, and we could say, all right, how do we make money more like in-game currency? And oh man, this is a whole nother can of worms. We could talk about the specifics of this in another stream. But the main point to say is that by making it so seamless and easy to use the new system, I think that most businesses are incentivized to take like whatever form of payment is possible. So it would be difficult for a business to say, we refuse credit cards and we turn down this. Rather, I think practically most restaurants, for instance, if they like cash, they would say that they still accept cash. And like when I go to restaurants, for instance, I like cash, so I often pay in cash even if I have other objects or other payment methods, to say that paying by cash is something that I want to continue to see around. So I choose to pay in cash to send the signal that I hope cash is here to stay, because I think there's something very natural and good about it. That being said, the opposite to that is to say, how does stuff get adapted? And I think a lot of the time is you present people with an easier option with less resistance, and you make it really easy, and then people will start doing it. So now, just as online shopping became a normal thing, making a video call also became normal. All right, we got a bunch of comments. Let's see what Hello has to say here. Okay, Hello says, Metaverse is just a new game. I truly believe it is nothing new. It's just a product Facebook made, which importantly associates with your real ID. Yeah, so this real ID point, I think, is very important. I'll just give one case. So here, I said I'm actually kind of like a Zuckerberg defender in some ways. One of the benefits of the real ID stuff is trust, security, so to speak. So, like, one place I have used Facebook myself, I would say effectively, it's served me well. They provided a useful service, was buying and selling used stuff. So, for instance, let's say I want to buy a guitar. Like, you could see there's a guitar behind me. I like to play guitar sometimes. So I want to try out a different sort of guitar. I could go to the retail store, and let's say a guitar will cost me, $800. But then if I buy it on the used market, I could get the same thing for $350. So if there's some kind of way to know, oh yeah, this guitar I see on Facebook is legitimate, because I looked at this person's profile and I determined they don't just seem like someone who's just flipping and turning it over. They seem like, let's say, for example, a guy comes from Japan. He wants to play a nice guitar while he's in the United States. So he goes ahead and he buys a new guitar, but now he has to move to Japan, back to Japan, and he did the math, and he found out that it would be more worth it to just sell it and take what he could get than to try to ship it back to Japan. Okay, so that story, I think it's a very plausible, hypothetical sort of thing. Who knows? I might have actually exchanged a guitar with this very person. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did. In this case, Facebook associating your real ID becomes a big advantage for the sake of trust. And I think that this is one of the reasons by which, as much as people like to use Mark Zuckerberg as a punching bag, Facebook and these big tech companies, people trust them more than they would like to admit. So on privacy and that sort of stuff, like everyone agrees, Facebook, they, take all your data. So let's just accept that that's a fact. However, then people implicitly trust these services in the sense that they say, could Google or Facebook verify like a person's identity? Do they know if a person has more than one account? Do they can Facebook figure out that sort of thing? And I think if the answer is actually yes, Facebook, they have all these privacy violations and stuff like that, but also they do provide security in a sense. Then I think that becomes major, major, major. So it is true, like Hello says Metaverse is just a new game. Like, yeah, that's why for a lot of the stream, we're talking about how a lot of these game mechanics and stuff that are introduced with Facebook and the Metaverse, they've been around for a long time. There's nothing new being invented here. But the difference, and we'll go back to this funny burger, the hamburger. How is stuff different? Well, by suddenly having people able to verify the real ID, which is associated with your body, your meat sack, whatever you want to call it, by having a way to link those two together, that is how the metaverse becomes different from just like an online video game where anybody could just make some anonymous new character and profile. Right, going down. Yeah, Dion says Facebook will use by Facebook for determining people's behavior. Yeah, not only that, it will give people suggestions for how their behavior should be, such as using the metaverse. Hello says MMO games before were used for chat and meeting purposes a lot, including even business meetups by some weirdos. This is just changing the package and taking away this pseudonymous nature. Yeah, I think that goes along with what I just said about the real ID and using the example of Facebook Marketplace as a kind of practical use case for why businesses and a lot of people will actually embrace and enjoy that sort of change. See, Dion says, not that Facebook doesn't do it now, but MV could really enlarge the scope for that. Yeah, so I think Metaverse, it is about scale. So once you get the major financial institutions hooked up to the Metaverse in some sense, that completely legitimizes and makes a thing common. Another topic for a different day, but I'll just bring up like stocks, stonks, Robinhood, a lot of these things. Before, these were kind of specialized financial vehicles. Like most people wouldn't own or think about stocks directly if you actually had to like call up a stockbroker and do a lot of work. Maybe you had some stock thing that was through an institution, like through your employment, some retirement vehicle, something like that. But you look at these old footage of like stock trader floor, whatever. You look at stuff like this. You could see, this is kind of a specialized sort of place. All the elite business yuppie hacker, but it wasn't just like me on my phone on Robinhood back then. But they've extended this idea and tried to bring that to people. All right, Hello says, I had a conversation with with a friend, really wondering why Facebook had bought Oculus. I don't see the value of the metaverse just as a webcam. He said it was partly to get gaming habits, as games are very addictive, and that's what Facebook wants for their products. Also, the camera can be used to enhance image recognition. Finally, Facebook has had declining user engagement for years and years because of aging users. Sure, they aren't using users because no one deletes accounts, but people lose interest in scrolling. And then Dion brings up some psychology stuff, Skinner box optimization. Loop burns people out. Right, so here we have these general comments that are saying that, well, we'll pull up a funny meme. We'll look at, it's also tiresome. So guys, what do you think about Facebook? It's also tiresome, right? There is this sense, and the other popular sort of buzzword that's going out is people will talk about burnout. So all this social stuff, the hamster wheel, right? People are experiencing burnout. All right. Facebook is making cryptocurrency called Diem. Yeah, so Facebook, Hello here is mentioning some of the actual mechanics that Facebook is going to use. Oh, we have another joiner here, Vez Quex. Hello. All right, so he used to trade paper. Yeah, so a lot of these ideas, I think they have been around for a while. The main point I'm making is that a lot of stuff has moved from sort of like specialist territory to mainstreaming. Just like how it used to only be like computers or kind of rich nerds play toys. You work at Boeing or something, you're a doctor, you have some dollars to throw around, then you might buy a computer to play with. It's the newest cool thing. Similar to nowadays how you have electric vehicles, how the richest, well, I won't say the richest, how like upper middle class working professionals might buy and play around with a lot of things that normal people wouldn't. So I'll bring this to Hello's comment about the Oculus and the VR stuff. So I think like the Oculus and the VR stuff is interesting in this way. People will look at the Oculus and the VR stuff. Let me just pull up that Sword Art Online VR. We'll pull up. Okay, look, we could have an anime girl with a VR headset. Okay, so this sort of stuff, it seems like esoteric, nerd kind of specialist stuff that we see here. So the question is, like, Facebook, they're putting billions and billions of dollars into this stuff. What's the point? Is it really gonna catch on? So our streams have been going on for a while now, so I'll refresh to say, assuming people haven't been here the whole time. One of the topics that I was opening up with was to talk about the financials a little bit, to say that Facebook, they're playing with a much longer timeline than like the employee who's like, I got to get to work at 9 and I got to make ends meet, paycheck to paycheck. It's the term. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. But Mark Zuckerberg is not living paycheck to paycheck. And venture capitalists are not living paycheck to paycheck. So you look at companies like Facebook and you say, they could throw billions of dollars at any sorts of projects. What is the direction that they're funding? What sort of things do they want to see developed? So you'll see, like, you go on social media and you'll see all these posts. People will say something like, why doesn't Jeff Bezos solve poverty? Okay, I think that these are non-stupid questions, but if you try to answer them, you might end up becoming a conspiracy theorist. Right, so you'll get questions like this. Could Jeff Bezos actually end world hunger? And you could actually research these questions and see what you think. In short, kind of what I'm saying about this question is, you have these companies and they have a lot of money. A lot of that money comes in the form of owning their own stock of their own company, and people pooling their money into those companies. So effectively, what does that mean? It means that these companies could recruit talent. It's about power. So they could decide how people live their lives, what sort of projects they build, and what they could do, basically, and pay them to develop the things that they want. That just made me think of this, this other Machina. This. Oh, what was that? That video, that movie that came out. But I thought that it's sort of Ex Machina was the name of this film. Anyways, the point of this is to say that you could have all these ridiculous setups that normally people like you or I, just a normal working person, could not pay for. They could not afford. But a company like Facebook, they have a research budget. Okay, only like feds and mega corporations have research budgets. The rest of us, we just like mess around with the settings and try to make a prototype out of like wood and paper. We don't have research budgets in the same way that people do. We don't. Well, I hope you guys don't do experiments on animals and other stuff that only certain big people could do. So the point I was making, though, was with respect to this Oculus and this sort of thing. We might look at this Oculus and say, like, who would want to strap a headset on their face? And my answer to that question is, right now, probably only nerds who are like, the real world sucks. Like, I want to check out, or kind of wealthier working professionals who just have some money to throw around. So how do you bring this to the masses? I think first it has to become easier. So that's what I was saying about online payments. Like Chipotle is a successful company and they have a Chipotle app. So you could assemble and build your burrito on the app, press a button, and then a burrito will come to you, or you could drive to them and you could pick up your burrito. They made it really easy. As a web developer, like I tip my fedora to these like front end developers of a lot of these companies. They're good at what they do. They're able to make successful, easy to use products. Like you could complain about the technicals. You could say, "Oh, so much software bloat, terrible, whatever." But it's like, look, bro, that's why they're getting paid more than you, because they're able to take somebody's money that hires them to make a certain sort of product, and then they deliver it. So all these sorts of things, they'll, like the corporate buzzwords they'll use will be like you want them to have an excellent customer experience, website experience, whatever they want to call it. Basically, okay, all that, what it all means, it's like, how do you make it easy, like as little effort as possible to figure out how to click the right combinations of buttons to get like a burrito, and then, not have angry customers. Instead, have people that will actually come back and that will enroll in a rewards program, so they'll continue to come back. So how do you make it easy and how do you turn burritos into a subscription service? That's look, they could hire me as a CEO, right? I just said it. How do you turn burritos into a subscription service, right? We could look at all sorts of other things, and you could ask a question like, how do you turn VR into a subscription service? Now, we've already turned VR in the sense, like, let's pretend you're blind. Okay, you don't see. Well, people are already, they have headphones and they pay for Spotify. So in a way, isn't that kind of a similar way where you're paying for whatever audio stimulus you want on demand? And we've gotten it down with like Netflix and stuff. So people, they'll pay for, you could say, for a certain sort of visual stimulus on demand. This has been successful. Like people spend so many hours with this sort of thing. Oh, we have a funny comment. Yeah, people who don't want to buy 3 monitors. Yeah, so I think that one of the things that we want to do, or not we want to do, that they want to do, is they need to hook up and package the technology so it's just easy to pick up and use. So it just works, so to speak. So would the world be a better place if everybody, installed Gentoo Linux or Arch Linux and understood, Unix system permissions and effectively we could say that computers already do everything that we strictly need to do. Like they're in terms of like I use Zoom as an example of a successful company that provides a valuable service. So we could say, at a certain level, are we able to make international calls? Can we do online shopping? Can we do all these things? And the answer is, with the current internet technology, yeah, we could do all these things. Like the internet is already hugely successful in this way. So looking at the VR and the AR stuff, the question then I think is to say, all right, so then what is the next step that we have in increasing people's engagement? And yes, with the live in the pod, the hyperloop that are King Herring. I don't know if he's still here, but he was saying how they want people to live in a pod and ride the hyperloop, and then I pulled up this picture of those tiny homes. So one of the questions is, how do you get people to live, in a tiny home with solar panels? How do you get somebody to aspire to live in this tiny home with solar panels? Like, sure, there will always be nerd kind of niche people that want it, but how do you get people that want that want to consume that? How do you get people to want to consume product from inside a tiny home? And that was me researching how to use OSV. Seems it's been working so far. Right, and I think that the answer to this is first these normal sort of game mechanics that we were talking about, how are already there through these like video games like MapleStory. Sort of the bare bones basic building blocks have been established and shown to work. Now the question moving beyond that is to say, all right, so then we got a small people and we know we have a system that can engage people. Now how do we get even more people into the system? And I suggested that the vector by which they're going to do that is ultimately you want a seamless integration, just like the burrito subscription service. They want to make it easy for people to engage, easy for people to do this, and then also you have to hook it in with money, because if people are incentivized to spend their time and to use their energy within these systems, then it becomes easy on a macro level to say, like nowadays, if you want to like learn how to code, become like an internet worker or whatever, it's going to take some specialized knowledge and training. If you're already doing something that works for you, like let's say for example you drive a truck and you make a good living driving a truck, then you don't really have much of an incentive to change what you're doing and to do something else. Now, if suddenly you have rules, regulations, maybe the news runs some scary servers about how truck drivers are losing their jobs, and you're like, oh, I don't know if this trucking thing will be viable, so I'm gonna, stop working at it, trucking, and go learn to code or whatever. Then these sorts of things get people to buy into the belief that a metaverse or whatever is the way of the future. All right, let's take a look at some comments. McDonald's ordering is so bad that there's a lot of people who won't use it. I agree. I would say the same thing too for like technical support generally. Like a lot of the time, let's pretend I have to call some big company to, I don't know, file a car insurance claim or whatever. Often I'll just press the buttons until I could like skip to a person, and then I just want to tell the person what my problem is, and then have them plug me into the correct service. And then similarly, like if I went to a restaurant, even if they didn't get my order perfect, like a lot of the times I don't really care. I would rather do that than use like the touch screen. It feels really awkward, especially like if there are people behind the counter and stuff, and then you just go up to the screen and you're like pressing buttons while there's a person that's standing right there. It just feels completely silly to me. Cool. Yeah, how do you get people to live in a tiny home? Yeah, and I think too. So we'll bring this as a close because it's been like 2 hours. Um, I think that the VR, all these things, one point, just looking at the direction that stuff is going in, we have to see it that they don't need to capture everybody at the same time with the same thing. There's diversity. So I opened the stream like I was talking about some stuff that's more specific to Asian Americans. Like a lot of Asian Americans will be familiar with this game, Maple Story. But for example, like a lot of my white friends, maybe they didn't play Maple Story. Maybe they knew of it. Maybe they did. I don't know. But you might play a different game like RuneScape or something where not as anime style, more like different sort of fantasy style, right? There's Japanese RPG versus normal Western style RPG, whatever you want to say. So, but then even RuneScape, it will have like a lot of very similar mechanics, similar things that get people engaged. There was a comment up here that was talking about Hello said it was something about integrating services, I think. Let me find it. Well, I'll just talk about the general thing. Yeah, so one of the big selling points, I think, of the metaverse will be right now we have all these different services siloed in different places. But the goal of like Zuck and friends with the metaverse is you want to integrate these services. And there's already a lot of places in which we see the integration of services. So I'll just type something. Integration of services. We already do this when we pay taxes. So when you pay taxes, for instance, like I mentioned, I trade some like stocks and cryptocurrencies. I do some of that stuff. My crypto exchanges, all of that, they generate documents for calculating like how much you have to pay in capital gains. If you have capital loss, how could you roll that over? All that sort of stuff. And if you use a lot of this software, such as tax software, such as TurboTax, integrates these many digital silos. With something like TurboTax, you'll connect your account. So it's like the service that TurboTax will offer is like, we make this easy for you because now instead of manually entering the values that come on your W-2, your 1099, whatever form that you're talking about, these services like the stock exchanges, stock exchange client, whatever you call it, they will automatically generate these documents such that you just click a button, it links it up, and then it calculates how much you will pay if you just follow the standard thing and you don't try to do anything different. So I think that one of the big things that we'll see with this metaverse stuff is an integration of services, because this is in everybody's interests. So let me elaborate by what I mean. It's in everybody's interest. It's in my interest, or like a normal person's interest, because you have other things to do besides like figure out and assemble a big complicated system with all these services. Like, I'd rather go for a walk outside than look through tax forms. Let's just agree. You'd rather go to the beach or something. Dion says he has to go. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for chatting. I'll be sure to announce when I do the next stream. All right, but yes, let's finish up on this point about integration of services. So it's in my interest because it's a total pain in the rear to do like taxes and stuff, basically. Now, people might say, well, yeah, this is actually by design. People made it really complicated on purpose. I don't even think you need to go to that level. I'm not saying that that is true or false, or even saying to elaborate on it more. The point is that as stuff is now, it's quite a mess. So I think it would be natural for people to want to welcome some form of integration in order to make things more manageable. It's just like with a computer or a smartphone. A lot of people, they don't want to deal with organizing the folders on their desktop or whatever at all. So instead of doing that, look, a smartphone manages largely how you arrange your folders on your desktop because you don't have folders on a desktop. So oftentimes I think that the form in which this integration idea occurs is that by funneling people into some integrated, unified system, people give up freedom in many ways to a monolithic system, because the monolithic system does make life easier insofar as you choose to interface with the monolithic system. Okay. Yeah. Vesquex says, how about integration in the same service? How the hell is anyone supposed to read 100 Discord servers? Yeah, okay, so obviously this question of integration it's a difficult problem. I'll just bring up two examples of companies that I was looking at recently. So there's this company like Palantir. I think it's like Peter Thiel was involved in making these things. So this is like the Fed data dream. And services like this, Gotham, Apollo, whoa, data, right? So companies like this, I think that the service that they offer, and it'll be to governments and people, not like you or I, will be aggregating all this sorts of data, and then, a person can't read 100 different discords. That's why all this AI algorithm stuff is so hyped, because it's not because people actually want or care about this. It's because it's the technology that the people that control billions of dollars, they're paying for this technology to be developed because it will be useful to them. Yeah, so this example, Palantir, they had a creepy obelisk just appear on the screen. And then, oh no, actually this Informatica company, that it wasn't as spooky. I just thought this was like a general kind of cloud computing service. Well, actually, they're related, so I'll bring it up. So I think that a lot of what we're seeing, you could look at these new companies that get venture capital funding and stuff. What is it that they do? Like, look, cloud first, data always, intelligent data management cloud. These companies, essentially, they're about integration, because they'll have clients that will be, these big institutional players, and then also like relatively new contenders to the scene. Like, for example, I'm bought a little bit into Robinhood. I think that Robinhood might succeed as a kind of social media platform, because among other things, like finance news. So if I follow like a handful of companies, I'll just use like Robinhood as a convenient like thing to just look at some news stories about different companies. So it kind of like solves a problem that Facebook's feed tried to do. Facebook's feed wanted people to get hyped up about like, buying different products through aggregating them on the feed. All right, well, Robinhood totally captured my market in the sense that like I'll go on Robinhood, I'll read some financial news, and then I'll be like, oh, it looks like this Palantir company is going to get a bunch of money, and then I'll go and I'll buy their stock. So like literally, that was just description of the sort of like a kind of sales pipeline, a little bit different because I'm not consuming product. Buying the stock is a little bit different. But I think the idea is the same, which is that you have these services that are useful to people for a certain thing. Then what you get is you have people that buy into a system. The integration is essential for getting people to buy into a system. I'll end with this one example, which is going back sort of pre online banking, even pre-online banking. Okay, one of the ways in which the stock market and all this stuff was able to grow and boom is because you had payment suddenly linked into these complex institutional services. So, like certain jobs, if the retirement money, they make like a savings account type thing for you. And I probably need to research these things more. I'd be happy to speak with somebody that knows and could tell me more about these things. But let's just say like 10%, 20%, whatever, of your paycheck is set aside every month. And you're promised to get some money later through Social Security or whatever. But what happens with that money is that it goes into an institutional bank who in turn lends that money to, Apple or IBM or whoever in some form, whether through venture capitalists or whatever. So it's like in a quite indirect way in which people, they don't even realize how they're signing up for the establishment, so to speak, when you work for like a government or a very large corporation. But these would be the vehicles by which people would lock themselves into this system. Because suddenly when your retirement savings, let's say it's mostly in mutual funds, stocks or something like that, basically you're betting like your security on your life on the health, the growth, and the survival of the metaverse, the establishment, whatever you want to call it. That's what's happening when you go down one of those routes. So you could have normal people, let's just say a doctor, a school teacher, just how about a loyal employee that has worked at the front desk of Hilton Hotel for many years. So this could be, you probably know people like this, just normal people. And they might not think about these economic topics, about finance, metaverse, all this stuff. They might not think about it at all. But the very arrangement that they themselves are in as an employee for these companies is part of this giant machine. So the integrations that I see coming in the future, it's no different than in the past of how, a person who just cares to be a good math teacher or whatever, they don't necessarily have to be thinking about making $1 million. Yet, because of the institutions that they're required to work with through their profession, let's just say through like a public school system or something like that, effectively they are being integrated into the metaverse, whether they like it or not. And if they find out later, hey, I don't want to be so tightly coupled with the metaverse, well, of course, we have your freedom. You can decide such a thing. But also, just as we have freedom, then there's consequences for that, right? Somebody might continue to work the same job, for 3 decades or whatever, because there's some sort of deal, there's some sort of promise to them. If they continue to proceed in that sort of way, then they'll be rewarded for it in a certain sense. So they double down, they dig down, and they continue to work through that path, understanding that if they do, as they contribute in their capacity, in their job role, and like this is all purely descriptive of mechanics, not to say this person's doing a good job, a bad job. I'm not even going to say like, oh, government workers, they don't do anything. I'm sure there's a lot of government workers who work very hard and do a good job. Okay, so you get people that in this capacity they're working and stuff, but their role by its nature is tightly coupled with the banks and who the banks give loans to, and so on and so forth. That makes such a person more tightly coupled to, BlackRock or Vanguard or whoever, than, for example, let's pretend you're a tradesperson, you're like a plumber or electrician, and instead of buying mutual funds and stuff, you just buy out a big ranch in Napa Valley, and you run your own a winery, and you hire family members and sometimes other help, and you try to build up your wealth that way, right? The rancher guy example, that person is much more establishment decoupled and also quite wealthy, compared with, for example, a working professional who's relying on some sort of fixed income contract, like Social Security or something. They could actually pay them quite a lot, but they sort of made a pact with the establishment. So I think that going into the future, the nature of the integrations is all sorts of people in all sorts of positions, whether you're a normal retail worker, you're a computer programmer, a sort of like a knowledge worker, whatever you want to call people. You work at a distribution, logistics, driving, all sorts of stuff. There's going to be a push as a lot of industries and things are centralized to get people to be more tightly coupled with the metaverse. Which at this point, the way I'm kind of saying it, I'm kind of saying like the metaverse in some ways is kind of it's kind of the same thing as the establishment, insofar as it's obvious that the establishment is heavily involved in this idea of the metaverse succeeding. And you could say, why is that? Why would you want that to happen? Returning way again to the beginning of the stream where I introduced some ideas, the nature of a game, a video game, like chess. We'll even start with chess, so not a social game, so to speak. All the rules are known in chess. All the possibilities you could actually lay out, and in such a world, with enough big brain computers, you could win at chess every time. Like I cannot, if I spent a decade studying chess, I still cannot beat a computer at chess, because the nature of the game of chess, it's such that it's composed of a bunch of discrete rules, and everything always behaves those rules. So the idea of a metaverse or a big game, it's like that. The complexity, of course, goes way up, which is to say, you have this highly controlled world in which certain things are simply not allowed to happen. Like, for example, if everybody's working hooked in to the metaverse, for example, I could say that a murder will not occur in the metaverse directly, because it's just avatars interacting with avatars. So there will be, different classes of crime, like cyber crime and all of that. But like within the metaverse itself, you won't have certain security concerns with the metaverse like that. Now, we could get into, oh yeah, well, you plug in your brainstem to a computer and all this stuff. We could talk about those topics a different day, of how real injury and harm could come from metaverse, virtual reality, that sort of thing. But I think it's a matter of integration, which is to say, different sense of the word integration. Before I was talking about integrating different services. Now this is talking about how tightly there's the metaverse and then there's just normal reality, then there's this goal in which to bring the two as close together as possible such that they overlap. And at that point, then you have the burger, the burger. You know they overlap when suddenly people's livelihood, in the sense of they actually pay for the nutrition, the food that they have, the food and the shelter, the things that would be essential to live yourself and then also have a family, if you're in a position to do that. If those things become dependent on the game that is the metaverse, then wow, that is a tight integration indeed. All right. Well, I think that stream has been long enough. It's very interesting. I think we have lots of topics for future streams. So I want to thank everybody who joined this stream and also those who view this video later, who view it not live. So thank you everybody for taking the time to come and hang out here. Feel free to leave comments, like and subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the day.